As a somebody who preserves and whatever, what is the, have you thought about like the difference between this potato and those potatoes?
Yeah. You know, I was thinking, what do I do with this potato? I mean,
That's what I wanted you to think about.
You had left, you had given me a sense of responsibility and agency in
Yes.
the piece, and so that there weren't clear instructions about what to do with the potato.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Giuseppe's work, there's a clear sense of what needs to happen with those potatoes. And what they're meant for.
Mm-hmm.
Does the work come with instructions? Does it say how many potatoes, what kind of potatoes, or does it come with the potatoes?
So no, in fact, there are general specifications for the number and size of the potato. So small, kind of hand-sized potatoes, and about 400 kilos, so 600 to 800 pounds of potatoes, he's formed piles of them in the middle of the room or up against the wall as it is here. So it takes on different forms, and it also changes depending on the scale of the space in which they're being installed. But the notion is that the potatoes, the pile of potatoes should be the same size and the same color as the bronze casts of the original potatoes that are mixed in with those. And actually, he specifies a particular kind of potato, a binche potato, which used to be very common and apparently is now more of an artisanal potato. But even that is, that's somewhat flexible. And that, it's what's most important is the size and the color.
And I think the scale, by designating an approximate amount, weight kind of thing, that it's going to end up in a pile that is about that mm-hmm. scale and size to humans. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I like about it also is that it's not, for the cast pieces, it's about the right scale, and it's like they don't get lost, but at the same time they're not so prominent as you look into the pile, but at the same time it's also not one of these things where I think, there's a kind of tendency in some works of contemporary art that want to just impress or bowl you over with some aspect of overdoing. And there's something about, this doesn't bully you in its effort either. It's a modest pile as well.
Yeah.
It's sort of enough of a pile.
It's certainly not a spectacle.
No, it's not a spectacle at all. The modesty and the humility of it is always in the forefront, which, even in some of the grander pieces of his, I think is still, that level of touch and of relation between the human body and the work is always, I think, held intact.
Yeah.
So I think that's really an important part of it. So back to your level of responsibility and
yes.
agency. Any thoughts?
Well, I thought for a minute, should it join the other potatoes in the pile? And then I thought, well, no, this is a separate work of art. It wouldn't be appropriate to join these two different
mm-hmm.
works of art. And I brought it to, because we had received a new work of art, I brought it to our director, Jeremy Strick, and showed it to him because I wanted him to see it as well. That seemed like an appropriate thing to do with a work of art. And I thought, would it be, what would we after spending time with this, what's the appropriate way? What's supposed to happen to it?
Mm-hmm.
Should it be buried in the garden? Should it, to go back to the earth? Or, so I don't know. What were you thinking would happen to this?
It was one of those things that I thought about that as well, and thought about finding a place, as you said, in the garden where it could stay and just do what it's going to do. And I thought about just, it's one of those things that for me, the art was in the action, and in the social dimension of engaging you in unpacking and thinking about it, and in the way in which the action could produce a series of other actions that made people think about what works of art do, what are the demands of permanence in works of art, the way in which it could, the action could engage us with how we think about time and duration and our own time and our own duration and things like that. And I felt like there were things that shouldn't happen to it, but that I thought that in a way I really had to work hard to not impose an end for it, and I wanted to not demand too much of you in the responsibility for it, but that in a way something would seem to make sense from our conversation, that we would decide what its fate would be.
Right, yeah.
Because it's not a work of art.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be preserved in that way, but it shouldn't necessarily be discarded either. It's not a ritual object. It's not a, it's kind of just a marker, but at the same time, there's something, I find, it's why I use them a lot in my work. There's something that's sort of always old about a potato, and there's something that's even, new potatoes there's something that's old about them, and there's something that's humble about them and modest, but at the same time kind of oddly noble in the way in which they're kind of both of the earth and old in that way. So the nobility of something, in a way, to me, initiates a kind of way of thinking about dignity in a certain way, and those kinds of issues. So I wasn't sure, actually. And I did occasionally find myself thinking about, oh, this should happen, this should happen, this should happen, and it seemed too constricting to come up with that end. So I don't know. Maybe we should give it to Jerome, and he can find it. Or find another place to leave it, or...
Well, it's